I really enjoy making guide videos. They are an opportunity for me to learn more on a subject, as well as share the information with you, hopefully in an entertaining manner. With that being said, I've been trying to force myself to make a guide to foraging for the better part of a month now, and for some reason, I just couldn't get into it. I even did the research on it to see how the system works and what potential value it can add to Wildlander. The other day when I was working on my Guide to Dragons video, I finally figured it out. See, I've been trying to find a way to make foraging seem fun, useful, and relevant when, in its current state, it just isn't. This is not to say that foraging can't be useful, but in most cases, there is a more entertaining or beneficial alternative. Hello Wildlanders, SK here, and this is not a guide to foraging. I recently did a poll with you guys and gals to see if I was the only person not really using foraging. It turns out I was in the majority, as about 80% of you do not use foraging after level 5, with only about a third of you using it at all. While I can't speak to why most people aren't using it very much, I can address why I personally don't use it very often. In Wildlander, I find foraging to be redundant by and large because the core things it lets you do can typically be done a different way much more easily. For example, you can get wood from foraging, but especially early on, you will end up with a couple branches if you manage to find anything at all. Whereas with an axe, you can just hit a tree a couple times and now you have 2 wood. Something you can do as many times as you want, while only using about 15 minutes time in-game. Another example is bones. You unlock the ability to search specifically for bones after leveling up a few times, which from my testing took about 10 to 15 minutes of just foraging over and over again. Instead, you could just kill a fox, wolf, etc. and harvest its ingredients. Adding on to this, if you purchase a better quality knife, you can even increase the amount and rarity of the items you harvest from an animal. Let's take a look at the next area foraging lags behind other options in game. Time. Because Wildlander is a survival-based game where you need to eat, sleep, and drink, time in the early game especially is very valuable. Foraging will always take an hour to do regardless of your progression with the skill, and in my experience, you will fail to find anything about 1/3 of the time. This, however, is not true with skinning, harvesting, and butchering animals, where you gradually improve at your craft, which takes less and less time as you improve. Not to mention that if you are foraging for food and you happen to find some, the benefit ends at your hunger being sated. What I mean by this is, there are no recipes to be used with these foods that add stamina regeneration for a time, or increased health regeneration. Because of this, it just makes more sense to go hunt an animal. The system for foraging also isn't all that fun in my opinion, as it's just sitting in a menu, selecting what you're looking for, and waiting to see whether or not you are successful. Adding on to this, I personally didn't feel all that rewarded for using this system, even when I maxed out the level, as almost all of the grime-covered objects I found were just mundane items that had no special value. Out of about 15 different grime-covered objects, I managed to find a single item of value, which was an amulet with the frost resistance enchantment on it. Shifting focus for a moment, the foraging system does have some redeeming qualities, one of which being that for alchemists, it's actually pretty useful to max out your foraging level, because as you progress, your ability to learn the effects from eating an ingredient improves. Once you max out foraging, you will learn all the effects from an ingredient after trying it just once, which is actually helpful. The other benefit to foraging is it does allow the player to find things they need when they may not have the means to do so otherwise. For example, if you are in need of wood but don't have an axe, you can forage for some. The same is true if you have no way to get food and need to eat, you can forage to find some. With that being said, the utility is incredibly niche, and usually in a playthrough, I would use it maybe once or twice, if that. This is the part of the video where we discuss some things that I think would improve the foraging system, making it more valuable and entertaining for players. First and foremost, I think the biggest problem with foraging in its current state is that it doesn't feel all that rewarding even as you progress. I would like to see an expansion on what types of items can be found, such as enchanted clothing that can be found, or powerful elixirs not found anywhere else in the game, or even broken weapons that can be fixed if you have the relevant smithing skill, or by taking it to a local blacksmith. I just imagine how cool it would be role-playing a character that doesn't really want to engage in towns very often. All of a sudden, I come across a broken elven greatsword. Assuming I would use this type of weapon, I now feel compelled to fix it up and take a genuine interest in it. This helps not only with getting a return on your investment, so to speak, but would also help with the immersion and roleplay aspect, as you kind of have these mini objectives from some of the items you can find. Currently, you can find grime-covered objects in the game, but circling back to my experience, it wasn't worth uncovering these items, nor was it easy, as you needed spider venom to do so, and more often than not, it wasn't an item that I would even remember. An alternative option using the broken weapon example would be, you find part of the elven weapon, and when foraging in that area going forward, you have a 10% chance to find the rest of the weapon, which you can then put back together. These are just examples, but the good news is that the team's options aren't limited, as they could do a number of things to refine this part of the system, thus making it more useful for players. Another change I would like to see is adding items to the game that would make your chances of finding something rare more likely when foraging. This is not an original idea, as fishing already has this mechanic, where if you use certain fishing gear, your chances of finding something rare improves. This is also true of hunting animals, as the hunting knives will affect your returns when carving up animals. I do know there is one item that affects foraging returns currently in the game. However, I think having more options for this would make it more interesting and give more options for roleplay. The last thing I wanted to see changed for foraging was the progression system. As it stands, foraging is very niche, and because of this, most players will not come anywhere close to reaching the highest level. It would be really cool to connect the Scrimshaw system and the Strange Brew system to foraging. If you weren't already aware, there is a system in the game called Scrimshaw where, as you level up your harvesting skill, you unlock new recipes to craft different items such as cache markers where you can store your belongings, or polishing animal eyes. There's also a system where, after creating a strange brew requiring an alchemist toolkit consisting of mixing a wolf's eye, Nordsmead, and 2 nightshade, you become inebriated and unlock a number of different recipes while you're intoxicated. This system also has progression where, as you craft these items when inebriated, it improves your skill unlocking recipes for the next time you partake of the strange brew. So what I would like is an alternative where, as you improve your foraging ability, you learn these recipes. Not only would this provide another option for players to learn these recipes without having to create the strange brew or harvest animals, but it would also make foraging significantly more interesting. I did want to state that this is in no way my attempt to talk down on the foraging system. I'm sure some players use and enjoy it. I'm just trying to give feedback on my experience with the system, as well as some examples of things that would have made it more useful for me. With that being said, that's all I had prepared for you today. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and consider subscribing. Stay safe, Wildlanders.